The following is a presentation of the Matt Talk Podcast Network.
International Podcast Day is September 30th, and you can help spread the word. International Podcast Day is dedicated to promoting podcasting worldwide. You may be asking, what can I do to get involved? It's pretty simple. First, head over to internationalpodcastday.com and check the suggestions. Second, use hashtag Podcast Day to join in the conversation. Remember September 30th. Now, let's start the conversation.
You've always got time for Short Time.
Hey, it's Mario Lopez.
David Taylor.
Brett Metcalf. Johnny Hendricks. Tony Ramos. Bubba J.
Mike Golick.
Matthew Modine. The one and only Chael Sonnen. And you are listening to the one and only Short Time Wrestling Podcast by the often imitated and never duplicated Jason Bryant.
Now up on episode 282 of the Short Time Wrestling Podcast, we go north of the border. It's north for some of us, a little more north than for some of us, because for me it's only about 4 hours to get to the Canadian border, to that 49th parallel. We're going to visit with 2016 Olympic champion Erica Wiebe from Canada at 75 kilos. First of all, Erica, welcome to the program. And how does it feel to hear that Olympic champion preceding your name?
Hello, Jason. It still feels pretty crazy, although I'm a little bit upset that this is the first time you've had me on.
Well, I mean, I've got to have a quota of Canadians. You know, I've had Corey Jarvis on earlier in the year. I've had Lee McKay on. You know, Lee Verling's been on. Yeah. Tamara's been on. So, I mean, I've had a lot of Canadians, but you know, it's about time. I mean, let's be honest. Before this, we were having your best world placement was 7th. So now you've actually justified your time here on the program.
Ooh, touche.
But you're taking it all in stride. But yeah, what's it like to finally go through this? I mean, it's been about a month since you've come home. The media here in the U.S. hasn't really picked up on things because you're not an American. But how's the media been like? The exposure been like up in Canada?
Yeah, I mean, it's been surreal. I really did think that. I thought things would cool down a little bit, and I could get back to my normal everyday life. But I really don't know if that's ever going to happen. To be honest, it's crazy.
So what is your normal everyday life? There's the life of a wrestler, and you know there's training. But for your day-to-day schedule, say, okay, you're not in a competitive phase. What are you doing? Where are you doing it at?
Like when I'm not wrestler Erica Wiebe?
Yeah, I mean, are you ever not wrestler Erica Wiebe?
Well, I finished my second degree up and I graduated in June of 2016, actually. So I was taking a course in the winter semester, and I was in 2 or 3 in the fall semester. And so for me, like being like a student was a really good balance for wrestling, keeping me just grounded and kind of having my mind think about other things. So now that I was done, I kind of committed myself like in June, July to just focusing on the games, and we were traveling a lot. And then September rolled around, and I figured I would go to the Olympics and then kind of see how things shook out. And I haven't really had time to evaluate what I'm going to do now, if ever, that things cool down for me.
In the United States, there's so many athletes that see financial windfalls after they win a medal. And if for wrestling, we have the Living the Dream fund down here where Kyle Snyder and Helen Maroulis are going to benefit from that with a nice 250 large American in terms of that. But what type of incentive programs does the Canadian Olympic Committee have for athletes that win medals?
Yeah, what USA Wrestling has done for their Olympic champions is absolutely insane. In Canada, we have like a similar program for just all athletes, and I believe that the USA Olympic Committee also has that, and it's you get $20,000 Canadian for winning gold, which it kind of seems like so insignificant after dedicating really the last like 15 years of my life to this sport. But it's something that's helpful, and I mean, I wrestle, and I never did this for financial windfall or glory. If that's what you're in for, you are in the wrong sport, my friends.
Also in the wrong sport if you're in for a financial windfall, if you're into covering this sport, because let me tell you, there's not a whole lot of money in that. But let's go back in time before you talked about wrestling for 15 years. You discovered the sport and started in, as you Canadians say, grade 9. Down here we say 9th grade or freshman year, but the school system's a little different up there. But what made you discover the sport, and how did you fall in love with it?
Yeah, I mean, it was offered at my high school. So there was a sign that went up on the gymnasium door, and it said Coed wrestling. And I looked at it and I thought, man, this is an opportunity to wrestle with some boys and wear spandex. And I thought, as a grade 9 girl, that was going to be awesome.
Okay, that's kind of the the rationale that a lot of mothers don't want to hear about. I mean, how did your parents take to that?
Yeah, I was really involved with wrestling at the time. I was really involved with soccer at the time. Like, I was playing soccer at a high level, and I love soccer, and that was kind of my passion. And I tried every sport in high school. So for me to try wrestling, I think it was weird for them, but it wasn't like uncommon or surprising. But I think that they were really surprised when I like truly fell in love in the sport, and I was like, take me to club practice, and, oh, Mom, can you drive me to this tournament in Toronto? And, the following year, she took me to across Canada to the Maritimes, to St. John's, Newfoundland, and I wrestled in my first ever national championship.
Now, in that era, and coming through being a female, getting involved in wrestling, now the Canadian schools do have, at least at the college level, university level, excuse me, because again, college, university is something different. Pardon my my Americanizing everything that you guys do up here. I guess you guys are used to it by now, especially with me coming up there. But when we look at the opportunities for women to get into wrestling, it seems Canada is more open to that option. It's not like, here in the U.S. sometimes a girl comes out and she might be the only girl on the team, and she's like, either the outcast or the freak, or everything is looking, either the newspapers are writing stories of like, oh, look at this girl wrestling. I mean, what is the opportunities like, and how is the acceptance rate for young girls that want to get into wrestling up there?
Yeah, I mean, it's 2016, and I really wish that it wasn't such a shocking moment for a young female woman to be interested in the sport of wrestling. Unfortunately, in Canada and as well as the U.S., that narrative still prevails. And if a young girl has success in the sport of wrestling, it's a shocking, it's amazing. She's doing something that no one else thought they could or had done before. But in Canada, women entered the wrestling rooms in the early 90s, and we trained those women, those pioneers trained alongside the men, and they kind of fought for their right to be included in the programs across Canada at that time. And I'm just one of the lucky recipients of that legacy. And I moved to Calgary, and I joined the University of Calgary wrestling team, and there was no question that I would be participating as an equal in that sport. And that's what wrestling is in Canada for boys and girls and men and women. We train and participate as equals, and I think that's one of the strengths of the Canadian women's program.
Helen Maroulis talks about when she got into wrestling, and her parents were worried about it because there was no future in it. And then when women's wrestling became an Olympic sport in 2004, her parents said, oh, okay, you can do this. Well, in Canada, you've had the university system. You said you went to the University of Calgary and wrestled. There are men's and women's teams, across the country. And, there's not, hundreds of them like there are here in the U.S. Across all divisions. But the men and women's programs, they train together. It's all freestyle. And then the clubs also work closely with them. So when you chose wrestling, I'm assuming your parents probably didn't have the same hesitation that, say, Helen's parents might have had.
Yes and no. I started wrestling a lot later than Helen. And so I started wrestling in grade 9, freshman year, I think we were saying. And so at that time for me, women's wrestling was not an Olympic sport still. But I started wrestling just because I wanted to try it. And then I kept wrestling because I had this passion to do it. Now I played soccer, like I was saying. And so in grade 11, I wrote my SATs. I was on a number of recruiting trips to the U.S. That was my goal for a long time, as I was pursuing sport, and wrestling was just kind of something I did on the side. And, in high school, I guess I had this maturity that, women's wrestling was eventually, added to the Olympic Games. And so that was the second year that I was wrestling, 2004, that women's wrestling finally got its exposure at the Olympic Games. And I don't know, I had this maturity to realize that I could go and play in the States for 4 years if I was lucky, and get a free education and have a great experience and our beautiful neighbors to the south. But I knew that there was something bigger, and I knew that I wanted to kind of chase this big crazy dream. And I went on a recruiting trip to Calgary, and everything felt right. And I never looked back.
When you say you're taking your SATs to come down to the States, your idea there was to play college soccer, correct?
Yes. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. I was going to play college soccer. And so, yeah, my parents were obviously very supportive of that dream. and they're engineers and they're very logical and practical thinkers. And when I told them that, I wanted to pursue wrestling, I think they looked at their bank accounts and thought about all of the dollars that they had lost, like helping fund my soccer dream. And they were very disappointed. And I bought my flight to move out to Calgary and I was an independent person, like from day one.
Now, I asked this to a lot of the wrestlers that they're making college choices when they're on the show. What schools in the United States were you really looking at before you ultimately said, all right, I'm going to wrestle up in Calgary?
I don't know. I don't know if they'd be familiar with like the U.S. Wrestling scene, but there was a school in New Hampshire and then Florida Atlantic University as well, which a couple of my teammates ended up going to and having great experiences. So I was in first year wrestling at University of Calgary, freezing my butt off in Calgary. It's like minus 30 in the wintertime. And meanwhile, a bunch of my teammates are partying in Miami. All my soccer girls are like partying in Miami, like living the life. And at that moment, I kind of questioned my future plans, but no, it was a great experience.
Yeah, you're talking to somebody who left the Virginia Beach area to move to Minnesota, so I guess I can kind of relate. And for the record, Florida Atlantic, Boca Raton, Florida, they're actually in the same conference now as my alma mater. So go figure, yeah. So the Owls of Florida Atlantic are playing the Monarchs of Old Dominion quite frequently in sports now. So that's interesting. Now, as we move to make that move, and that's one thing that I was kind of curious about. You're from just outside of Ottawa, and for those listening to the show in the U.S. that are geographically challenged, that is the capital, and it's a long way from Calgary. It's not like Canada's like, it's a big country. We know it's a 35-hour drive, being conservative, or it's like a 4.5-hour flight. I mean, we're talking New York to L.A. type of distance here. I mean, what's it like to move away from college to do something that's like, okay, I'm taking a chance on this sport here?
Yeah, I mean, luckily, I was pursuing education and I've just always been the kind of person that, like, I always just am really present in the moment, and I love, working hard, and I was committed for that, for the 4 or 5 years, whatever it would take me to get my degree and see where life took me.
Now let's look at 2008 when Carol Wynn wins an Olympic gold medal for Canada. How much did that impact not just your wrestling career and your wrestling life, but your life in general?
It was really cool. So I moved to Calgary in the fall of 2007. So I came to Calgary and it was Frosh Week, we call it O Week because, Frosh has all these negative connotations, and in Canada, we got to be PC, we got to be inclusive, and all these things.
Don't get us started down here on PC, okay?
So, I came for Frosh Week, and I had kind of spent the summer preparing to go to university and working hard and relaxing and not really focusing on wrestling. And our women's national team coach, Lee Verling, shot me a text, and he's like, "Hey, Erica, welcome to the city. Our women's national team is preparing for Worlds, and they're preparing for the Olympic trials in a couple of months. Like, would you want to come out and train with them and just be an extra body in the room?" And, that was the reason I came to Calgary. And I didn't think on day 2 I would be training with the next Olympic champion. But we didn't train, obviously, together because she's much smaller than I am. But it was surreal being in the energy of that room and seeing, a lot of the people that I looked up to as role models, battling it out. And so it was a really quick introduction to what I was going to be expecting to be in Calgary, which I think is arguably one of the best training rooms in the world for women's wrestling. And it was a really, really quick introduction to that kind of environment. And so, I started training there, and in December of 2007, Carol won the Olympic trials, and that year I made my first, and so then in 2008, I made my first junior world team. So I spent the summer in Calgary training for the junior worlds, and alongside the crew, alongside Carol. And it's pretty crazy. I'm like pretty fascinated with excellence and just fascinated with the process around me. And so I watched and I gave it my all every day in the room. But it's wrestling. It's a humbling sport. You get taken down no matter who you are in the world. And I think the best athletes in the world know that you need to be pushed by the best, and they seek out those environments and those contexts and situations. And so I got to learn from the best how to do that. And I got to wake up at 4 a.m. and watch Carol win an Olympic gold about 6 months after I chose to be in that environment and to be training with her and the coaches and the support team that were behind her. So, it was pretty insane.
Canadian women's wrestling has always been regarded as one of the best in the world, along with Japan, the United States, and other countries here and there, Mongolia, Ukraine, Russia. But when you look at that era that Carol came through with Tonya Verbeek and Christine Nordhagen, Martine Dugrenier, these are the trailblazers or the real era, the highlight era of Canadian women's wrestling. Whereas comparatively in the States, we have the Patricia Miranda, Sarah McMahon, and even before that, the Tricia Saunders. How do the women's wrestlers in Canada look at Carol and Tonya and Martine and Christine, and how do they look at them and look up to them and basically register their importance to their career, your career, to what they were able to do in blazing the trail?
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. Like when I made the Olympic team, it was like this weird feeling where I was like, holy shit, like I'm on the same, like I'm doing what Carol and what Tonya did. Like their accomplishments, Tonya medaled at three subsequent Olympic Games. I mean, that is impressive, that dominance. I mean, maybe it's nothing compared to Kaori, but for a Canadian woman to do that and for me to be able to see her and at work, occasionally throughout the year, it was something that was really special. And it makes you really realize that it's possible. And so, it's huge to have that legacy come before us.
As an athlete, when do you think you turned the corner in terms of going from, okay, I'm a junior world teamer, then there's a significant gap that some athletes have to deal with when jumping from the junior level to the senior level? I mean, when do you think you had closed that gap and eclipsed it and be like, okay, I'm a notable senior level athlete here?
There's a couple corners, I think, on this journey. It's definitely not a straight line or a simple one right turn at the next stoplight. But I think for me, the first kind of real true corner was getting back to Canada after being in London at the 2012 Games. And, I wanted to go to 2012 so bad. I thought, it would be perfect. It was 4 years after I moved to Calgary. I actually wrote in my school yearbook, watch for me in 2012, which is pretty ballsy now that I think about it. Like, where did that come from? But, and so I lost the trials, by the slimmest of margins to my teammate, Leah Callahan at the time. Now she's called Leah Ferguson. I lost the trials to her and, luckily, fortunately, she asked me to travel to London with her as her training partner and to help push her to have success at the Olympic Games. And so I really had to kind of sit back and quiet my competitive self for that process. Like I wanted to do everything I could for Canada and, do everything we could to win a medal for Canada at the Olympic Games. And so for me, I lost the Olympic trials and the next best thing I could do was help somebody else win. And so I really quieted my competitive self and I did everything I could to make sure training was for her the best that it could be in the months leading into London. And I got to be in London and I was an accredited member of the Canadian Olympic team. And I watched and I learned and I watched everything that each of the 4 women that were representing Canada went through. And I took so many mental notes and I actually snuck up onto the Olympic mat in London, when the venue was closed and kind of people were packing out and all the security were looking the other way. I'm not even sure. And I stuck into the official Olympic venue and I walked up onto the mats and I got to feel what that felt like. And it's scary. It's so scary because the dream it's so far for so long. And then you find yourself at the Olympic Games and you're not competing because you've lost. And I think I left London and I returned to Canada and, I had been at the Olympics, but not competing. And so I really had to kind of look deep within myself and ask that question, like, can you do this? Like, do you have enough in you to hunker down for another 4 years? Like, I knew what it took to prepare, to train, to try and make the London 2012 team. And I had to think really deeply, did I have enough to, represent Canada at the Rio 26 games? And not just represent Canada. Like, I knew that if I was going to be on the Canadian Olympic team, like, I had to be a medal contender. That's just the nature of the strength of our program in Canada. We're not sending anyone to the Olympic Games that is not a strong medal contender. And that was a really, really tough question to ask for, because I'm not the type of person that says a bullshit answer like, yeah, I'm going to go to the Olympics. Like, I actually hate those people who just, who are so unabashedly, it's like they seem so, that dream is so intimate. And so to kind of share it with so many people, I think is a little bit inauthentic. And so I really had to dig deep and think about if I could do it in 4 years' time. And I had the skills, I had the physical skills and the technical, tactical skills. But did I have the mental skills to get me there, to be, to be a contender on the world stage? And so that first corner, I think for me was, can I believe in myself to put myself into that position? And the following summer, I wrestled Leah off for the spot on the 2013 world team. And I spent, that was a big hurdle for me to beat my teammate, Leah Callahan, who I had poured everything into. And we had trained every single day. And she had beat the snot out of me for a number of years when I first moved to Calgary. And so I had to overcome that hurdle. And I just, I visualized, and I did, I wrote in my journal every single day, and I imagined that match a gazillion times in my mind. And so the day that match came, it was in Toronto, which is, again, 4 hours away from our training base. That was where the world team trial was going to be held. And that night, I was in a hotel room with my close friend Jasmine Meehan, and we went to bed, and we were both so excited to wake up the next morning. And we woke up the next morning to a phone call in the hotel room. I had the best sleep of my life, and I roll over, the phone's ringing. I'm like, what the heck? And as I look at the phone, as I pick up the phone, I look at the alarm clock, and it's Lee Verling's on the other end. And I look at the clock, and it's 9:14, and I was supposed to be wrestling at the venue at 9:30. And as I realize this, Lee yells in my ear, "Where the hell are you, Erica?" And I jumped out of bed, and luckily I always pack my bag the night before, because I'm just really, that's really important to me, just to have everything laid out and ready to go, so I can just have a nice relaxing morning and have my coffee. And I jumped out of bed, threw down the phone, shook Jasmine awake, and we ran out of the door. I put my sandal on, we ran out of the door. But we were driving this 2-minute drive to the venue, and I actually felt so confident and so ready to go in that moment, because I had prepared physically, but more importantly, mentally, to win that match for so long. And I think that was kind of the first turning point for me as an athlete.
But the lesson here is set your alarm clock and set your phone and set your roommate's phone. And that's not the ideal situation. You might have had the best sleep in your life. There's a reason you overslept.
I know. It was, it paid off though. I stepped out onto the mat and I felt so ready. I didn't have time to be nervous or to overthink my warm up or anything like that. I didn't have time to have a warm up. So, the adrenaline was pumping, and I don't think I've ever beat anyone so convincingly in my life.
So the lesson is sleep in, I guess. Sorry, and you missed out on the Tim Hortons coffee though.
I know. We got that afterwards.
All right, so as the Save Olympic Wrestling movement comes around, and ultimately they create 6 weight classes for the women, we've seen athletes move around. Vorbieva and Jenny Franson moved down in weight classes. Adeline Gray came up and had success right away. And how much did the weight class shift affect you? It's from 72 to 75. Were there any thoughts about going down, or were you going to be at the top weight?
Yeah, I remember so vividly when the weight classes were announced, and it was like along the same time as the rules changed significantly. And I remember that was around Christmas time, and I was at a camp, and I remember right away the the coach at this camp was like, so Wiebe, you're going to go 69, eh? And I was like, hell no. I was like, people kind of thought I was a little bit small for the 72 weight class, but I wanted to continue focusing on being athletic and being strong, and I had no qualms whatsoever growing into that weight class. And more importantly than what the weight was, I think it's important to think about the style of wrestling. That was the way the style of wrestling and the sport was going to shift. And for me, my biggest strength was always my pace, was always my athleticism. And with the introduction of the 2 3-minute rounds, I knew that I could push the pace and be a better athlete than anybody I stepped on the mats with, at that time in the sport. And I was most excited for the way the wrestling was changing as a sport. And then the weight class I didn't care where I wrestled. I just wanted to wrestle.
As we look at the way the Olympic team is set, and I actually had the opportunity to come up to the Canadian trials, which we're in December. And again, let's talk about that a little bit. And from an athlete's perspective, we also talked about that with Corey Jarvis, and when he had, he set the team, and then, it's up to him to qualify the weight class. Well, you guys have been pretty good at women's wrestling up there. So as you said, you make the Canadian team, you're kind of almost expected to medal or be a contender for a medal. So when Team Canada, Wrestling Canada Loot, let's get that terminology correct, sets the trials in December when the Olympics are, almost, 8-9 months away. What's that do for you in terms of your preparation, and how does it change your schedule from, say, the Nationals, which are coming up this coming year? They'll be in March versus, trials in December. I mean, talk about that process, what it's like to set things so early and have everything be on your shoulders coming through the qualifiers.
Yeah, I don't know why you crazy Americans do it the opposite way.
Because we're hard-headed. We like miles, we like pounds, and
and last-minute defeats or upsets, I guess. I don't know. In Canada, we've always done it this way, so I don't really know any differently. We have a couple of our different sports that have their qualifiers really late in the year. But I think, obviously energy system prep and physical preparedness is such a huge part of wrestling. But another key aspect of wrestling is, the mental preparedness and, the technical and tactical preparedness. And so I think as for the Canadians, we made it our bread and butter to send the most prepared team to the Olympic Games. And so by making the Olympic team in December, you then can sit back and watch. And, I wrote a list down. Every time a new group of women qualified in my weight class, I added their names to the list, and I started watching video, and I started preparing my tactical match analysis of those opponents. And, it just gave me confidence, and it gave me, that ability to have control over the circumstances. And I was, of course, ready to go physically and mentally when I stepped on the mats in Rio.
Now, you also had a chance to step on the mat in Rio once before down at the test event in February. Again, basically, if it wasn't for Team Canada down there and the women's team in the hotel, I wouldn't have had any bug spray. So you guys definitely came prepared down there. And that's one aspect about Rio that people were freaking out about, at least as far as the American media goes. And, with the Zika virus affecting women differently than it does men, obviously, because women they have children, men just contribute to the having of the children process. But you guys weren't taking any chances with the bug spray down there. And let's talk about the comparison and maybe the benefit you got by wrestling in the test event. Granted, not in the exact same venue, but just in the Olympic Park back in February to getting the idea, the lay of the land when you got down there for the Olympic Games in August.
Yeah, that was our third time being in Rio since the London Games. We went right at the end of 2012, and then we went again in 2014, and then, of course, we went in January 2016. So I was really hoping that the Olympic Games would have been the third time for me being in Rio, but it ended up being the fourth, so I couldn't do the whole, 3 times the charm cliches or whatever. But every time I went to Rio, it was a new experience. It was a better experience. And I think I just got more comfortable. Rio it's not New York City. It's not Toronto. It is it is its own crazy city with crazy things going on, and it's just different culturally. And so, every time we went, we got more and more comfortable in the Olympic City, and being there in January in the test event, I met a bunch of the Olympic volunteers. I'm really good friends with this guy, Igor, who was, in the back in the Olympic venue the day I competed and at weigh-ins, and we became really good friends at the test event. And it just kind of added to, the normalcy of the games. Like there was no surprises when we stepped in Rio for the Olympic Games in August 2016. We had been there, we had toured around the village in January, we had toured around the Olympic venues, we had gotten prepped on all of the various issues that we were going to face. And the Olympics is crazy in terms of distractions, in terms of media hype, in terms of just the spectacle. Where else in the world are you going to get 10,000 of the most beautiful people from every different corner of the globe congregating in one place? And so to kind of do everything you can to minimize the craziness and the wow factor, I think that's really important.
Yeah, you can't beat the weather that was down there either in August, because it's summer everywhere else, and then on the southern half of the world it's winter. It's like, hey, I saw one mosquito the entire time too. So the second time I didn't need y'all's assistance this time, but. But we talk about Rio, and then we also talk about your weight class, and looming in that weight class was the world number one, Adeline Gray. You had wrestled her numerous times. And first of all, what is that dynamic like between you two as competitors? Because you guys had the same goal. You're both ranked 1, 2 in the world. I mean, you'd beaten each other before. I mean, and then you see you're on the same side as her in the bracket. I mean, what goes through your mind when you're like, okay, I'm going to have to go through the one to be the one?
Yeah, I was looking forward to it, to be honest. Like I visualized that day for so long, and I wanted to have the toughest draw. Wrestling, it's so random, and I was truly ready for anyone. So when I saw my draw, first of all, I took it one match at a time. There's no guarantees in the sport of wrestling. And so I won my first match, and then I was like, okay, what's happening next? I won my second match. Okay, what's happening next? And I was like, guess I'm not wrestling Adeline. Okay, Bella Ressa, I got a plan for her. Let's do this. So to be honest, like I didn't really factor in Adeline. We had been at a camp in June in Toronto, and we had wrestled a little bit there. To be honest, she didn't seem that interested in wrestling at the time, and so, everyone has their own ways of doing their Olympic preparations. But I had done everything I could to prepare for August 18th, my day of competition. And I was ready to beat whoever I had to beat on that day. But to be honest, I was ready to beat anybody, but I just wanted to wrestle my best, and I would be so happy with the outcome if I wrestled my best. Sometimes you just got to break down greatness into small, doable tasks. And I think I spent the last 6 months truly doing that. And the day of competition was no different.
You mentioned coaching and training in Calgary and Lee Verling. And then there's also another guy that's also been involved in this coaching thing. Guy knows a little bit about Olympic wrestling, Paul Ragusa, who, again, not in your weight class, but, also right there with Lee and doing the training. I mean, that excitement factor. I mean, you could pick both those guys up with no problem and give them both hugs. I mean, what was that moment like coming off the mat? You're hugging everybody as you come off. Okay. I mean, what is that moment like for an Olympic champion?
Yeah, it's been a month, Jason, and I still can't really wrap my mind around it. I mean, it's this incredible experience, and we dream about it. We lust after it, and Olympic champions for so long had just seemed so kind of untouchable to me, like these kind of demigods that live among us mortals in a way. Like I truly have romanticized this Olympic journey. But the way that I approached the Olympic Games, like when I myself was, ended up being kind of the main character in this quest, it was just another wrestling tournament. And, it was just the same competitors that I've seen day in, day out on the last 4 years. And And I had a task that I needed to execute on. And so, a couple maybe minutes after the Olympic Games, it kind of, and it's, in some ways it's like anticlimactic, because you're just like, this is it, I just accomplished this, whoa. And for me, I think maybe it's natural to be like, okay, well, what's next? Like that's been my mentality on this whole journey. Like, okay, I made the Canadian Olympic team. What's next? Okay, I need to qualify for the Olympics in March in Texas at the Pan Am qualifier. Okay, what's next? Okay, I need to prepare for the Olympic Games. And, I want to win a medal for Canada. Okay, what's next? So and honestly, I haven't even had a second to let it kind of sink in and reflect upon it. But one thing that I really truly believe is that, if you're not enough before you cross the finish line or before the buzzer rings, you'll never be enough afterwards. And so, this gold medal is like the culmination of all these years of hard work and struggle and tenacity that I've put in. But I wanted to be defined by the process through which I went through to step on the mats in Rio on August 18th rather than the outcome. There's how many 10,000 athletes in Rio, and 300, just over 300 of them get to walk away with the Olympic gold medal. And maybe there's something different and special about each of those champions. But I think it's truly the journey that we all go through. I think that defines who we are. And, I'm just lucky that I got this shiny piece of hardware to bring home as a souvenir throughout the journey.
There's a couple things that happen after the final whistle gets blown, and I had the opportunity to call all the matches there, which was really cool because obviously from an American standpoint, getting to call Helen beating a legend in that from an American standpoint was just like, it was overwhelmingly emotional for me. And, getting to know you over the years, it was really cool. I've said this to your friends who had met us, like, of course, as an American, we're pulling for Adeline, but if there was somebody else that was going to win it, we're like, okay, let's make it Erica, because we've always had a good relationship with the Canadians. And actually I got to give your friends some shout outs here, because they're who I told this to at USA House of all places.
Oh my God. Yeah.
I run into Canadians. Well, one, I'm going to say it's Karen and Natalie Gallen, Brianne Bay, Dan LaFontaine. They're all like, who are you picking to win? I'm like, come on, I'm an American. But I'm saying if, things didn't go well for Adeline there, but from a personal standpoint, it's like, okay, well, at least somebody else I know wins it. But taking that off the podium, you've got O Canada. In America, it's like hearing the Star Spangled Banner is the one thing the Olympic athlete just, it's an emotional thing. Is it the same type of feeling from what you understand when you hear the first bars of O Canada?
Oh yeah. I feel like, think about all these iconic moments that you have when you throughout history of athletes on podiums at the Olympic Games, and to switch the lens around and be the one standing on the podium watching the flag get raised for you. It's have everyone, instead have they're all looking at you, and you have done this incredible thing that you have watched so many people do before you. It's surreal.
I can't imagine what it's like, because one, I don't have that much athletic ability to even be any type. I mean, I don't even know. I don't think podcasting is an Olympic sport, so it's going to be a while. So I guess what my role was as close as I'm going to get to an Olympic gold, and that's about 50 feet away from you guys. So one, it was fun to watch. And one thing I noticed about your performance is, and you mentioned your athleticism, even against Guzelle Manurova, who is a seasoned veteran. I mean, she medaled in the first, Olympics that women were allowed to compete in. And, it's like, wow, this woman's still here. She still got it. But it was just, your motion, your attacks. I mean, the leg shots were there. I mean, you looked like you were fluid the whole time. When you got behind in any of these matches, I mean, how do you maintain your focus, and how do you maintain that pace that you keep talking about to ultimately come out and, win big and win late?
Yeah, it doesn't just happen. I mean, that's discipline. And I talked about that first corner that I turned, and that was, kind of cultivating that confidence in myself and my abilities, and the respect for my own talent. That was an intentional process that I went through to kind of cultivate that discipline and really reach into kind of the pace and the intensity that I could put out on the mat. really allow it to come to fruition.
All right, Erica, we have finished up the formal portion of the interview. Now we get to the fun part where I try to throw 10 questions at you and see if you can answer them in 90 seconds. And I don't want long, drawn-out responses. I want the first thing that comes to your mind. Are you ready to roll?
Ready.
3, 2, 1, 0.
Question 1, what's the best match you've ever watched?
Oh my God. Probably Carol winning gold in 2008.
Okay, you won the Olympic gold. What did you have for dinner?
I had a burger at the NBC lounge.
Most revered Canadian athlete of all time?
Mark Tewksbury, my Calgary homeboy.
Favorite flavor of Gatorade?
Lemon lime.
Good call. Best wrestling movie of all time?
Isn't there only one? No, there's two. Vision Class, come on.
All right. Favorite international wrestler outside of yourself?
Bogomoev.
Okay. If you had to live in the United States, which states would you pick?
Hawaii.
All right. Who's got the better gut wrench, Paul Ragusa or Lee Verling?
Paul. He's half the size, but twice the strength.
What's the better indication of Canadian culture, Tim Hortons or Swiss Chalet?
Timmy's, come on.
And what is your spirit animal?
Komodo dragon.
Good one. Okay, bonus question. Poutine, Canadian staple or overrated tourist attraction?
I'm from Ottawa, so le poutine est vraiment bon pièce de Canada.
Okay, I have no idea what the hell you just said, but hey, all right, I'll take it. All right, I don't know if you beat the clock or not, but a lot of fun. Erica, so in the time we got left, one, they can follow you on social media at Erica Wiebe, and that's I before E, especially before BE. I don't know. I can't think of anything trendy to say there, but social media at Erica Wiebe. Where else can they follow you and keep up with your travels and your jaunts and your media tour?
Yeah, I mean, on Twitter, at Erica Wiebe. On Instagram, I just tried to mix it up and do at eWeebs. That's EWEEBZ.
Zed, that's another Canadianism here on the show.
Z, sorry for all you guys. And then you can, check out my Facebook page as well, Erica Wiebe.
So, as we close the social media thing, that's something I want to close with because, when you become an Olympian, you get that nice little blue check mark on Twitter. How much did your social media explode following winning the gold medal?
Yeah, it's been pretty crazy. It's been cool to just share it with people from all over the world. And I have gotten a significant spike in creepy messages from.
Hopefully, the ones trying to get you on the show are not part of that creepy message.
Oh, you were one of that group before I won the Olympics, so don't worry, Jason.
Good deal, yeah, because it's like I'm not creeping up on your DMs. I don't know whatever the kids say these days, but Erica, appreciate the time, and it's been a lot of fun, and I appreciate you coming on the Short Time Wrestling Podcast, educating us down here south of the 49th.
Thanks for having me.
One of the cooler Canadians you'll get to talk to, Erica Wiebe, Olympic champion. I'd like to thank her for taking her time out, and she's been on a busy media tour up there north of the border. For those of us that live south of the border, or, well, that south of the border, not that south of the border. But, hey, I mean, we got people listening to the show in Mexico. I think we got 150-something different countries that listen to the Short Time Wrestling Podcast or have at some point or another. And I got a hunch that this episode will be listened to more so north of the 49th parallel than south, because after the Corey Jarvis episode, you guys up there just blew up the podcast. So big thank you for that. And, speaking of international questions and international pleas, if you have not listened to this show frequently, if you're few and far between up in Canada between Corey Jarvis, Lee McKay, the Canadian Trials, and Erica Wiebe, There are various different iTunes stores, and I discovered this because of my podcast nerdery. What we see in the United States on the iTunes store and subscribing to the Short Time Wrestling Podcast at matttalkonline.com/getshorttime. Well, there's a different iTunes store in Canada. Just like there's a different iTunes store in Mexico, there's a different iTunes store in Switzerland, there's a different iTunes store in the UK. And this is, we're coming up on International Podcast Day. Again, another super nerdy thing that I like to do outside of this podcasting thing that you're listening to. Well, September 30th is International Podcast Day, and there's a gratitude award, and it's a big part of it is the international review. So this is my plea to my Canadian friends, those who I share a border with. And yes, I share a border with, let's see, if I go straight north, Western Ontario, like extreme Western Ontario, and Manitoba. I think I can be in Winnipeg in 6 hours. Maybe I'll go hang out with Adrian Bruce one of these tournaments, or go up to Thunder Bay and Lakehead, which is in Ontario. Or as I learned from the aforementioned Brianne Bay on the show, who was one of the people I had met in at USA House wearing the I Am Canadian hats, the Molson hats. I never did get one. Because I'm not Canadian, but the hats would be cool. But or as she called it, T-Bay. So actually, my in-laws live in Silver Bay, Minnesota, which is a couple hours. Anyway, I'm getting off the topic here. I'm trying to impress you with my Canadian knowledge that does not consist of the Edmonton Eskimos or poutine. So, international reviews are kind of a key component to this gratitude award that's being thrown around for International Podcast Day. You have until September 27th to leave a rating and review that would count for this. And also, if you leave a rating or review between now and September 27th, you qualify for one of 2 gift packages for Matt Talk Online. So not too many of those gift packages make it north of the border. So if you're interested in qualifying for such gift bag, or you just like the show and you've been listening since I covered the Canadian Olympic trials back in December, and or you're an American, you think it's cool that I'm interviewing some people from overseas, even though there's not actually a sea you have to cross to get into Canada unless you're coming from Hawaii. Okay, you go to matttalkonline.com/getshorttime. That'll take you right to the iTunes store. Or you can go to matttalkonline.com/listen to Stitcher. That will take you to the Stitcher store. You can leave ratings and reviews, specifically reviews, at either one of those places. And then you'll qualify for one of 2 gift bags from Matt Talk Online, which will include a shirt. Working on getting the hats, but definitely a draft glass, which you can drink your Canadian or various different things. I know you guys don't drink Labatt Blue up there. That's like natural light, up there. It's like nobody drinks Foster's in Australia. I mean, let's get over this stuff. Although there was, I can't even remember what type of beer I was drinking up there. I'll have to ask Andy Ross from 49 North. Great wrestling website up there anyway. But so that's what you qualify for. I would appreciate it. You can show your gratitude for the show, and I will show you my gratitude in return with a gift package. Now, if you like wrestling content, we got 14 wrestling shows here on the Matt Talk Podcast Network at matttalkonline.com. We also have a free daily wrestling news email list that is sent to you at matttalkonline.com/news. You can go there. You can sign up. It is free. And you get 25 of the day's best stories coming through from various outlets from around the world. Yes, there is Canadian stuff in there. There is Indian stuff in there. I don't want to read any more about Narsingh Yadav, though. Jeez. There's going to be plenty of stuff about Mongolians. We talked about that on the World Wrestling Resource podcast with Dennis Hall and Terry Brand's part of this network. But those are the things that we're doing. We've got the Gratitude Award through the review. So, again, there. We've got the daily email wrestling news at matttalkonline.com/news. And that's that little pop-up you saw on the bottom right of the screen if this is your first time coming to the website. Also, there is the patrons. You can go to matttalkonline.com/join the team and become a patron of this page and a patron of the network, a team member. That will get you various swag bags and items of that regard. And we've had a pretty good push for this lately, especially since the show no longer has a financial sponsor. The sponsor itself is basically you, the wrestling fan. So this is a fan-supported show. Compound Wrestling at cmpteamwear.com is providing our gear, and they're doing a great job. So give them a follow at CMP Clothing, and check out their team gear at cmpteamwear.com. You can also go to matttalkonline.com/teamwear. That'll take you right there. So who's new? We mentioned a couple of you last episode. Steve Meehan from Long Island. He has done a great job covering wrestling for as long as I've been covering wrestling, and he goes even beyond. Up in New York, Steve Meehan really supporting the network. I'd like to thank you. Of course, you can be getting this shout out just like Steve by joining the team at MattTalkOnline.com/join the team. That takes you right to Patreon, and that is where you can put in whatever you would like to give monthly, because this network is providing hours and hours and hours of free on-demand wrestling content with a variety of sources. Earl Smith is about to drop some seriously good stuff for Sudden History. Richard Immel at USA Wrestling gives us Mark Hall on bonus points. The 10 shows that I manage myself, ranging from Buena Vista to Virginia Tech to the World Wrestling Resource to Attack Style Wrestling, the Virginia Wrestling Roundup, so many different things. The Hall of Fame Legend Show, which is primarily crowdfunded. So the point that you donate to and then what you give monthly, that also helps this show. That helps the Hall of Fame, the National Wrestling Hall of Fame, in helping me produce those Legend series that will go into the National Wrestling Hall of Fame. So there's an incentive not just for you to get some stuff, and there's not just an incentive for me to finance these shows, but there's some incentive for you to actually donate to the Hall of Fame and give us something that's going to preserve these interviews for a lifetime. I mean, Stanley Henson was the first interview on the Hall of Fame Legend Show. I interviewed him 2 summers ago. He's 98 years old. He's approaching 100. He is the oldest living NCAA wrestling champion. His story is preserved because of this network and this show. So that's all I've got for you today. A lot of fun with Erica Wiebe, a great kid. Those Canadians are so fun to hang around with, don't you know, eh? See, first of all, I'm South Canadian. My mother-in-law sounds like she's from Moose Jaw. I don't even know. I'm just throwing Yellowknife, De Beers Diamonds. What else can I throw out there? Andy Ross? Any other Canadian cliches I can throw out there? Then again, down here in Minnesota, we've got umlauts and lutefisk. So you guys can have a field day with all of that. So I'd like everybody to thank you for spending your time with me as we talk to some Olympic champions. Big shows coming up in the coming days. We've got Super 32 preview with Dave Barker and Sarah Koenig. Stipe Miocic, UFC heavyweight champion. He's going to be coming on the program soon. And we're going to get some info from Richard Immel about his gold status and the world traveler from USA Wrestling. So keep an eye out for those here on MattTalkOnline.com. I'd like to thank you for spending your time with me, because you've always got time for short time. Eh?
There's a difference between TV and movies, eh? Okay, go back to movies. Geez, now that hoser's growling. Yeah. Take off, will you? We're doing our movie. Don't wreck our show, you hoser.
This show is part of the Matt Talk Podcast Network. For more wrestling podcasts, head over to MattTalkOnline.com.